Welcome everyone to another edition of Building from Ground Up. Yeah, so thank you everyone for coming. We'll be starting in a bit. I'm sure we have many people from different parts of the world, people from Nigeria, Cameroon, Kenya, people from US, UK. Thank you everyone for joining us on this edition of Building from Ground Up, in which we'll be focusing on building in uncharted territories. So Building from Ground Up is a program put together by the UK Nigerian Tech Hub, with Tech Cabal as its implementing partner. So I'm sure we're going to have a great time learning today from our guest speaker, who's going to tell us so many things about, how she's been able to build her company, Imisi 3D, and, in a different, an uncharted territory as it is. But before we get right to it, I would like to actually, welcome and introduce a member of the UK Nigerian Tech Hub to give us a short address. So like I said before, the Building from Ground Up series seeks to bring together founders across Nigeria and UK tech ecosystem to share their stories of building and scaling. We started season 2 in December. Last year we had Etop Ikpe speak on the first episode of the season, and it was very enlightening. If you missed it, the link to the video will be shared in the chat room so you can catch up. Last week, we also got to speak with Vivian Waka and Joa Piero of MedServe. It was very, very insightful, talking about how they built a health tech company in Nigeria. So now I'll be inviting the Acting Deputy Country Director of the UK Nigerian Tech Hub, Gift Agboro, to tell us more about the series. Gift, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Once again, good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us this morning. Thank you for taking our time to learn. So my job here is really brief. I'm just going to talk about what we do at the UK Nigerian Tech Hub and why we thought, putting together the Building from Ground Up series, should actually happen. So first off, the UK Nigerian Tech Hub is an initiative of the UK government, Department of Digital Culture, Media and Sports to support the growth of the technology ecosystem in Nigeria. Our work pretty much is centered around stimulating local digital economies, cutting across building high-end digital skills. So you see a lot of our programs geared towards that. Another bucket of what we do at the Tech Hub is to support tech entrepreneurship. So we design and implement programs that builds the capacity of startup founders, of angel investors, and tech entrepreneurs in general. And that's where the Building from Ground Up series sort of like fits in. The third bucket of what we do at the Tech Hub is to foster innovative partnerships between the Nigerian tech sectors and international businesses. We do that with the aim to, lead more trade and investment in the long term and also increase productivity and growth in Nigeria's digital economy. So why the Building from Ground Up series? In one word, stories. We know how important stories can be in shaping the growth of aspiring founders and early stage founders. And we wanted the stories to be well curated across the UK and the Nigerian tech ecosystem, where we bring together founders who have been able to build their companies from the ground up. So the goal is to bring them together as guests and allow them share their stories, allow them share their wins, their lessons, and also give a learning avenue for these aspiring entrepreneurs such as yourself, right, to pick out lessons from their stories and how you can apply them in building the companies or building the solutions that you're set to build. For us here at the Tech Hub, we strongly believe that tech entrepreneurship and supporting entrepreneurs generally is one way we can increase Nigerians' local digital economy. So as I said before, my work here is very brief. Personally, I'm really looking forward to today's session with Judith, and I'm really hoping that you are you came here with an open mind to learn as well as to ask questions when the time comes. So over to you, Daniel. I'll just listen in. Thank you.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Gift. Yes, it's definitely important to support entrepreneurs and founders and companies because they are the bedrock for the growth of the country. Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone also that's joining in. I see people in the chat box. I see Zainab from Gobe. I see Dora from Dubai. I see Clement from Lagos. I see Chika from Abuja. Who else is come? Oladipo from Lagos. Yeah, and the host Moses from Oshogbo, Osun State. Yeah, thank you everyone for coming in. I'm sure more people will come in and share the link with other people who aren't in yet. I see you. I'm from, I don't know how to pronounce your name, from South Africa. Thank you. Halima from Kano. Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. I can't call everybody's name. Good to see everyone. Now to the reason why we came here. So I'm going to be introducing our guest speaker, Judith Okonkwo. And before I go on, I'd like to read her citation just to get to know her. So Judith Okonkwo is a technology evangelist, business psychologist, and organization development consultant with experience working in Africa, Asia, and Europe. She sits on the board of the European Organization Design Forum, advises startups, not-for-profits, and SMEs on emerging technologies, and is a guest lecturer at several higher institutions. She's the creator of Oriki Coaching Model and a co-founder of We Will Lead Africa. Judith is a fellow of the Royal Society of Arts and an associate fellow of the British Psychological Society. In 2016, Judith set up Imisi 3D, a creation lab in Lagos focused on building the African ecosystem for extended realities technologies and connecting XR communities across the continent. The lab provides learning opportunities and access to XR resources for creators and enthusiasts while supporting engagement and adoption by the wider community. And consulting and content creation for clients. In 2018, she set up AR VR Africa, which holds large XR events on the continent. The most recent 2020 AR VR Africa Hackathon, which had participants from 27 African countries. Judith is especially passionate about the adaptation of immersive technologies to create solutions on the continent, particularly low mid-cost virtual reality for education, healthcare, and storytelling. Imisi 3D's most recent VR film production, Lagos at Large, made the Forbes list of the top 50 extra experiences of 2019. Well, that's a lot. Judith is also a current member of the World Economic Forum's Global Council for Augmented and Virtual Reality. Yeah, so that's just a bit, I believe, about Judith. There's definitely more to her. And yeah, thank you. Judith is here. Thank you. You made it finally. Happy to see that here. So Judith, thank you for being here. Now we're going to get right to the conversation. Okay, so Judith, I would just like to start like this. So 5 years ago, virtual reality hadn't gained this much adoption in Nigeria. Virtual reality was just this cool thing you did. Kids, you play with games. And now with the recent craze about augmented reality and virtual reality, you have big tech companies investing heavily in it, and the metaverse, right, which became a big thing last year. How is Imisi 3D tapping into this, to further its ambitions? And beyond that, let's backtrack. What are your thoughts on this first? This increase in recognition and adoption.
Danielle, thank you. Thank you very much for the question. Thank you much for having me here this morning. It's a pleasure to be here with you all. That's a great question. And you know what? It might be that the hype has just started kind of like for everyone in the last year or so with the metaverse. But with the extended reality technologies, which is my focus, and for those who don't know, the extended reality technologies are augmented reality, virtual reality, and mixed reality. Even though they seem like new technologies and we're just getting onto them, they've actually been used for a long time. So let's look at virtual reality, for example. For sort of like over 60 years, NASA has been using it to train astronauts. The United States Air Force has been using it to train their fighter pilots. The thing then was that the kind of experiences that are affordable for the consumer today, back then would take rooms and rooms of equipment, would cost millions and millions of dollars. So really what we're seeing is that the technology is becoming more accessible, although of course there's still, there's still quite a few obstacles, particularly if you're on the African continent, and that there are consumer products being created so that, the everyday person can access it. That said, I think when it comes to sort of like the realization, now it's a long time coming. I mean, we've been in the XR ecosystem development space for 6 years now. And that's because even though there had been a lot of debate about, will there be a killer use case for VR? When will we see real adoption? Like all of those kinds of questions. The one thing that I think there was no debate on was that spatial computing, which is sort of like the foundation of, these immersive technologies, was going to become the computing platform of the future. And for us, if that was the case, that meant that, we all had to get involved. Certainly African voices had to get involved. And that's what we've been trying to promote as much as possible. In terms of reaction to the uptick, I mean, it's happening. It can only be a good thing because we feel more people should be involved with these technologies. I think that one thing it does do, though, is put a spotlight on the gaps that we have, right? So it puts a spotlight on like the funding gaps. It puts a spotlight on the talent, talent that we need, like all of those sorts of things. But I also hope it means that more people will start thinking about how to get involved, how to start conversations in the sector, how to have a strategy so we're intentional about what we do with these technologies going forward.
Yeah, thank you. That's very enlightening. Yeah, it definitely spotlights basically just bringing more attention to this sector, and then more conversations start, and that's how progress really happens. And now to zero into Imisi 3D, how would you say reception has changed before and now? I mean, are there people that are now calling your phone or, setting partnerships, yeah.
I mean, it's definitely changed. I mean, I remember when we first started, and this is kind of like way back in July 2016, the first place we ever did anything, we set up on the 6th floor of CC Hub. And, I mean, just to tell you about the kind of thinking I had to do, then I was like, we've got to get people here interested about these technologies. We've got to get them talking, trying, building for it. So apart from going onto Amazon and ordering a VR ready, computer and getting some headsets and some books, I also went to Costco and got a big carton of Kit Kats. And on the table, I had this bowl of chocolate. And people would pass by and like ask about having chocolate and then stay and try virtual reality. And then the conversation would go. But, back then, people were asking really, very real questions about like, okay, this is really exciting. This is great. People were saying things like, hey, I can, be in a chair and travel all over the world. I don't even need a visa. That's awesome. But then they would say, well, how can I make money from this? And I think that that's something that really becomes critical when we start talking about these technologies and start telling people to deploy their time and resources to acquiring the skills and knowledge to specialize in this area. I think particularly then it was this thing where it's like, wait a second, how do we kind of like take this journey even further? Now, it's the same kind of thing because, of course, I should probably mention some of the obstacles here. So some of the major obstacles with, playing in the space is that even prior to sort of like this last year, there's been billions and billions and billions put into the immersive technology space in other parts of the world. So in North America, in Europe, places like that, like the industry was going without us, even if we were not ready to acknowledge it. And alongside that, because like there was, there wasn't that level of activity on this continent, that was further exacerbated by the fact that the hardware wasn't even accessible here. So classic examples, like the big tech companies in the XR space do not sell their hardware locally. So if you wanted to buy a Quest 2, for example, or HoloLens, you would have to go outside the country and the continent, for the most part, and purchase it, or try and order it in via Amazon. And that means that by the time it gets to you, you might pay almost double what somebody in, in Houston or in Leicester or somewhere like that would pay, which is, considering the purchasing power of the Naira, a bit of a problem. And then, of course, the infrastructure to support. So thinking about electricity, thinking about connectivity, the daily struggle with that. So there are kind of like quite a few things that will make you think, wait a second, am I really going to dive into this? But I think the good thing now is that, of course, with, the pandemic, first of all, was kind of like one accelerator for these technologies, because people had to start thinking more creatively about how they would connect. And these technologies are a great tool for connection in new ways. But then, of course, industry started thinking about, beyond that connection, what else might we be able to leverage from these technologies? And I've mentioned, places like NASA and the United States Air Force. So you know that there is like a real industrial component here where there's a lot of ROI in terms of investing. So yes, those, calls have been coming. People who might have said like, oh, this is interesting. Oh, you might be having fun with this. And I'll say, wait a second, what exactly can we do with XR? Can you tell us a little bit more about it? We want to get started. That's nice to see, but then we have to, I think, in the space, in the ecosystem, start supporting the development of talents so that the industry can be supported when all these people, start deploying these technologies. We have to incentivize the space so more people want to get involved, those sorts of things.
Yeah, awesome. I'm glad to hear the calls. You said calls are coming. That's definitely a good thing. And yeah, I remember, back then it was always a question of, well, this is cool, but then how do you make money from it? Because VR kits, very expensive. The more sophisticated it gets, the more expensive it is. I remember when I think Google launched their little card box. Yeah, it was cool, but then you also needed a smartphone, right? So it's like, yeah. So definitely good to see that there's progress. And talking about Imisi 3D, you've gone along with 2016 till now. What would you say are some factors that were, pivotal to the success that the company has achieved today?
A lot of things. I think one is just, it was a space that we went into where it was like, a lot of people were like, wait a second, you're crazy. You want to do what? And you want to do it where? Like all of those question marks. And, the first thing I should say is that my background is in business psychology, right? So I'm a psychologist, and it's like, okay, you have a lot of learning to do to get up to speed, in this space and to like achieve this dream that you have. So the first thing, of course, was like a learning, and I think really, really aggressive self-learning. If you want to do anything, I think regardless of what it is, if you're like committed to pursuing that knowledge wherever you are, then it's going to happen. I mean, I would email anybody if I thought that they could point me in the right road or give me some useful information about VR. I met with people all over the world, like if you would have coffee with me and sit with you in a square in San Francisco and hear about how to run XR hackathons, I'd go anywhere to learn. So that was the first thing, try and gather as much knowledge as possible. The other is, the people, the networks and everything, they're everything, right from us sort of being in CC Hub to first start up, running those first few events, and then actually having a lab there through to where we are today. All of that was through the networks and the partnerships that we were able to leverage, which is so, so important. I think particularly when you're doing something like we're doing where the focus was all about impact. We're oh, we want to build this ecosystem and nobody's really seeing why an XR ecosystem should exist. You have to find those people that will back you no matter what, even if they're you might be a little bit crazy, but I'll introduce you to this person, or, we'll give you, a little bit of support just to see what you make of it. Like, you need all of that. So really go for that. The other thing is persistence. I mean, let me be frank, it will not be an easy journey, but you have to really want to do it. Or I don't know, but you have to have that certain level of, I'm going to give this everything I've got, because it will be an uphill battle. A lot of people will not understand your vision, and that's okay. But you kind of like apply yourself and start working on that story that you need to tell to sell that. Because of course, we all know the power of storytelling today, right? Like, if you can help people to see what it is you're trying to achieve, then you just might bring one more person on board, and that one more person might make a difference. And then you have to be, I think, super collaborative in sort of like this kind of venture. It's not about competition. It's not about business. So make friends, work with them, support people, that sort of thing. If you're trying to grow something, then you know that together we're going to go much further. Like, that's the goal at the end of the day.
Oh, awesome. You said many useful things, from learning to talking to people, the right people, your network, to persistence, also collaboration, which you can't do it alone. Thank you. That's very useful. So I think about the fact that Imisi really 5 years thereabouts, and I'm curious to know what's possible and what would you consider like key achievements so far within the past 5 years.
We're still standing. No, I mean, yeah. Apart from that, so I think the fact that even though there's been so little kind of like support coming into, into the country and into the continent specifically for XR, I like to think that there's some things we've done that, have shown the world that, hey, you shouldn't forget about, Lagos or Nigeria or Africa when it comes to XR. And in some of those stories, we've played a part, which is really fantastic. I'll give you some examples. I mean, I hope everybody knows about Kachi Benson's fantastic 360 documentary, Daughters of Chibok. That was made in 2019 to commemorate the 5th anniversary of the kidnapping of the Chibok girls. And if you haven't seen it, if you have a Quest 2 headset, it's currently on Oculus TV, so check it out. I mean, that went on, to win the best VR story, the Golden Lion, for that at the Venice Film Festival. No African had ever done that before. In fact, it was a shock to the whole world. It's like, wait a second, who are you? How did you do this? Really stunning. And it was such a pleasure to work with him to do that. And if you don't know about Electric South, there's this really amazing nonprofit based in South Africa that have been supporting artists who want to work with immersive media and have an amazing extensive catalog of content from across the continent. So check them out too if you're looking for immersive media made in Africa. So there's definitely that. In 2020, during the pandemic, we were going to hold one of our hackathons, early in the year, in 10 countries. And then the pandemic happened, and of course, the whole world went crazy. But despite that, these country partners that I had around the continent, like, stuck with me. And in the end, we ran this hackathon over several months. We opened it up to the entire continent and had, people from like almost 28 countries participating, which was crazy in a pandemic, and it was hybrid as well. So it was happening virtually while there were some offline locations. And, we already talked about some of the challenges when it comes to the continent with XR, the infrastructure, the electricity, connectivity, and all of that. So, like, trying to hold a virtual event for XR is pretty, it's pretty manic, but somehow it happened. And I think that was really spectacular. And the fact that, there was some really, really exciting things. I mean, I think, and this is not our success, like, specifically, but one of these successes we have is that the we as collective now, this country, this continent, is that there's so many incredible young people who are so creative, who, if you just give them a little bit, are ready to do amazing things, right? So how can we do that? I think another highlight is last year, one of the things for several years that I've been trying to do is to get an African delegation to a global XR event. So back in the day, you'd have things like Augmented World Expo, Oculus Connect, Naval Virtual happening, and typically if we were there from the continent, we were just there to kind of like observe or as guests, not really participating. But last year, we were able to partner with Institut Français and take an African delegation to Laval Virtual. We had an African pavilion. We had 6 startups, 6 different countries exhibiting their XR products and services, which was fantastic. And it was everything from hardware to augmented reality for education, which is great because, people to be thinking, oh, an African pavilion and, an XR, exhibition, are they coming to watch? Are they just coming to observe? But we were there to do business. And that, I think, is fantastic, and to share knowledge and all of that. So like those kind of things, I really give me joy, as well as, the everyday things. I think wherever we've gone, our goal has certainly been to create access to these technologies, to spark interest and to inspire people to build and create. And really, wherever that happens, it's a win.
Wow, that's definitely, I'm sure you had to just put them in concise. I'm sure there are, many ways. That's really laudable. And I like the fact that, you said it's also the everyday things, right? Wins are the big ones, and also the everyday, little good things that happen. All right, thank you so much for that. So this next question I have is one of the questions that members of the audience sent ahead. And it's pretty much, about at what point did you realize that Imisi 3D was a great idea? And then before you speak, I'd like to point out that, so personally, my initial thoughts about VR were just, from a gaming mindset, right?
Mm-hmm.
And until one day when I learned that there were kids in schools that were using it to learn. And of course, the impression of what they learned stayed longer or better than what the teacher would draw or say, or what they read in a textbook. And that really hits me. And I'm like, this is more than fun and games. So of course, Imisi 3D is more than VR, but that was my moment. And I'm like, there's something more to this, right? Beyond, there's healthcare, there are other use cases, but just curious to know, at what point did you realize, it was a great idea, or was something you wanted to go into?
So Imisi 3D started in 2016. I was explaining that as a child, I was really passionate about a toy called the Viewmaster. I was always interested in, science and technology. I was super curious about the future and all of that. I used to read a lot of sci-fi. But kind of like fast forward to sort of like 2014, if you follow the XR space, you probably know that was when Facebook acquired Oculus, and that made a lot of headlines. It was purchased for a couple of $2 billion, and the world was like, wait a second. And the year before that, of course, the Google Cardboard had come out, as you mentioned. So a lot of people could kind of like play with this, accessible if you had a smartphone, way to kind of like peer a little bit into the world. And for me, like, it was always just about the possibilities, I was just like, oh my God, I want to get my hands on this. I want to be able to see what people do with this. At the time, 2014, 2015, I'd spent like a year helping Andela get started and seeing the amazing things that young people were doing in tech, here in Lagos. So I got my headset. I got the Samsung Gear VR first, once it came out. And once I put it on, I just kept thinking, kind of like, imagine this technology and all the potential. And then one thing I was saying was that I was one of those people that was probably like, no, this is not about gaming. Let's not have that gaming conversation when it comes to VR. It's for like education, and it's for like medicine, and like all of those other things. So I just kept thinking, imagine like this technology and this talent that we have on the continent, and what like an amazing thing that can happen for that. And, one of my real passions is about using, XR for education. So, like all those thoughts were in my head, and I'm like, wait a second, it can't just be in my head. I know people need to access these technologies. I started to tell people about it, but it became the kind of thing that you can talk and you can talk, but if you want to see action, you have to do it. And so I did, right? So I got started.
Oh, that's insightful. So you are definitely at the opposite of me. While I was the gaming type, you are you are the
I,
let's
I was, but I have to say, even though I'm just like, oh, I don't want you guys to just kind of like lump it into this gaming and entertainment bucket. Gaming has so much value because even though I'm like, then I was super resistant to just this label of gaming. If you look at almost everything in the world today, there's like some element of gamification, right? To like drive engagement and all of that. So, I think I just didn't want people to kind of like dismiss it because they were thinking gaming, or thinking entertainment. I wanted them to understand that whether it is manufacturing, or design or agriculture, whatever it is, like you can find some application of XR.
Yeah. That's definitely valid. Like putting it in a box, reduces the value. But being able to spread it out and realize that in almost every sector, I dare to say there's a role for it because it's just a different, type of reality, right? So, yeah, that's definitely very insightful to hear. The next question is, so I know that Imisi 3D is not for profit and is impact driven, and it will be interesting first off to get a sense of why you chose this approach. Then this person's question is, what is a common misstep you see in corporate social impact strategies? So I'm guessing the question is, when companies try to do social impact, what did they get wrong?
All right. So I think my connection was a little bit fuzzy there, but I think you were asking me why did we take the impact approach, and what do companies get wrong when it comes to CSR? Is that correct? Okay, perfect.
Yeah, social impact. Maybe yeah.
Yes. Okay. All right. So why are we all about impact? Our goal is very, very specific, right? The goal is that we want to advance the African extended reality ecosystem. And maybe I should just spend a few seconds talking about why that is important. Earlier on, I'd mentioned that one thing that the world acknowledged, even though they didn't know what applications might look like, is that spatial computing was the computing platform of the future. I think today, you'll see a lot of people talking about AI and sort of like some of the inherent biases and the ramifications of that. I think that in its full realization, and that's one thing to say that, with technologies like the extended reality technologies, they're still emerging, boundaries have not yet been defined, but that in their fuller realization, they will be so pervasive in everyday living that if they have been created without African voices being part of that, without African voices helping to shape them, then I think we will be in a very, very dangerous world. So for me, us being involved in XR, us kind of like, like that was, I think, a priority for our future. I think it is that critical that if we are thinking about the world, not just in 5 years or in 10 years, but like the future, like we must be involved, that must happen. And so that's what's driving that. Apart from the everyday solutions and grand challenges that can, be solved by using these technologies right now. You mentioned education. One, example that I always give is if you go to a local secondary school in a city like Lagos, for example, the chances are that there'll be 80 students in one classroom. The chances are that they will just have, chairs, tables, and maybe a black or whiteboard. So pretty basic infrastructure. Those children will, likely not have, access to funding to go on field trips. They won't have labs to do the sciences, things like that. And I say this kind of like tongue in cheek, but even worse, they might have a PC, like a desktop computer somewhere, which cannot be used because there's no electricity from the grid. So my counter is, if you put a VR lab in a school like that, right? And it's like the low to mid-cost VR, like think about things like Question, all of that, that can be charged by solar portables. In a sense, you have this device that is ready to transport your students to wherever you need. It can be a virtual lab where you can do all sorts of experiments where you If it's chemistry, you're not paying to buy chemicals or anything like that. They can travel anywhere in the world. They can wander inside pyramids. They can explore the solar system. Like all of these things are possible. And for me, that then means that trying to achieve like, SDG 4 quality education is possible if we deploy the technology in that way. So there's that's immediate now, as well as what it means when the whole world is like clued into, some future that is really completely driven by spatial computing. So we've got to be part of that. So I think that is like a core driver in terms of why we're doing this work and why it's impact driven. I think if we had any other focus, we wouldn't have gotten as far as we had, because it is a tough space. And, you're like, I think if I think about us, like we're stretched. I mean, when you were asking what we do, I'm like, if I start listing now, we'll be here until the end of time. But it's like, no, really, because it's like you can see that XR is relevant across all sectors, right? So whether it's education or like healthcare or manufacturing, like, I've been to cement plants, I've been to, like, where haven't I been? Because, that's how relevant the technology is across all of these different verticals. In terms of corporates and what they get right or wrong with CSR, well, the first thing to say is, hey, thank you for wanting to do something. That's great. The second thing is, it's great, but it's also for you and it's for us, right? Because at the end of the day, every organization is only an organization to, get something across to its customers. And those are the people that in the end, your CSR is impacting. But then the real thing is that whatever initiative you want to, do or pursue, chances are that there's somebody on the ground who's been doing the dirty work all the while. You know what I mean? Find those people. That is what I would say to corporates. Work with those people, because if they've been doing great stuff already, you just then get to elevate what they're doing, and you look good, they look good, the impact is increased and everybody's happy. And I think maybe one little way of doing that is, something that's been sort of like making the rounds on social media recently is the young man who's doing the chess in the slums, right? Now you can imagine if a corporate had decided to go and set up on, in the slum and try and do that, and how that might not have gone so great. But now you have somebody who's doing it, you can just kind of reach out and say, hey, how can we make this even better?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. Just to piggyback off your point about how you've been everywhere, the next question is about what are the prospects of this extended reality of creating jobs for young people. So this, just to get a sense of, does this create more jobs for people? Yeah, what does it do? What's the impact?
Yes, and yes, it does create jobs. It will create jobs. These, everybody has been talking about the fourth industrial revolution, this, that, and all of that. With all the hype, a young person out there, if you don't know this now. If you can start to learn, these jobs are definitely coming. One of the announcements that Meta made last year was that they're planning to create 10,000 jobs in the EU for XR. Just to say, if you're not thinking about it that way, we're an extension of that EU. You could be part of that talent pool, but you've got to have the skills to play in that space. The other thing as well, of course, is that with these technologies, as we've seen with tech in general, that, remote working has really sort of like seizing the day, right? And as, the use and adoption of these technologies ramps up, so of course, there's a talent shortage. And you know what they say, talent is king. So wherever you are, be it Lagos, be it Owerri, be it Kano, if you can, work miracles with Unity 3D on Real Engine, if you have crazy skills when it comes to 3D, if your UI UX game when it comes to sort of like the spatial spaces out of this world, then there's somebody who's looking for you. So yeah, definitely, whether it's not immediately present, like where you are. And the good thing I think is this, is that if you have those skills, you're able to transfer them sort of like across different elements of technology, right? But it's like you could have, so for example, you could be doing, UI UX already, sort of like in a 2D sense, but then you're just increasing your value if you're then able to do it for XR as well. So it's really, if you're ready in the game, sort of like leveling up, and if you're new, going, broad enough that you can play in the space later too.
Awesome, awesome. So just to drill a bit further, I know that it's very expansive, but can you give some examples of just a few examples of I guess skills or roles so that people really get when you say more jobs, right? They can touch it. Of course, you get to read more later on their own.
So I think when people think about the extended reality technologies, they're really thinking about building, right? Like, how can I create those experiences that you'll see, when you put on a headset or, when you're using some sort of mixed reality device. And one thing that I would say is that a lot of, well, first of all, how the content can be created, if it's, sort of like something you'd consume with a VR headset, it might be 360. We already talked about Daughters of Chibok earlier, which is sort of like a 360 video. And for that, there's specialist 360 cameras that you use. So that's something that you might want to consider learning. Much of the other content, though, is created in game engines. And I already mentioned the two most popular, which is Unity 3D. It's free to use for personal use. So if you haven't already downloaded, play around, start to learn, and Unreal Engine, both were super accessible. The thing though is that you do have to, when you're building, have a VR ready laptop. So that's looking at improved processing power and graphics card. But I think the thing is that most devices, today are sort of like making that the standard. So hopefully, and if you don't have access, then by all means come to our lab in Yaba if you're in Lagos, and there's systems there that you can use, right? So there's that. So when it comes to the game engines, it's building with that. The scripting languages for that, C#, C++, if you're sort of like at the programming end, like definitely ramp up on that. Apart from that though, so many, as you can see, there's like a real marriage between creativity and technology when it comes to immersive technologies. So you have people playing from all sorts of other spaces, filmmakers, artists, etc. So if you're in that space, yay, think about, oh, okay, how do I want to extend my craft with these technologies, and we've seen sort of like all of these different iterations and offshoots and things like NFTs and all of that happening. So think about that. I already mentioned UI UX. If you are creating an immersive experience, think about it. You have got to get that right? You want that when somebody puts on that headset, that they're not turning and then the world is disappearing or something like that. Like, you want somebody whose game is tight, making sure that that user experience is out of this world. So if UI UX is your thing, we need you. We definitely want you. We need researchers. We need sort of like people who are making sure that all of the experiences that are being created, that have been thoroughly researched, that they're true to whatever life that they're supposed to represent, that sort of thing. It goes without saying that 3D artists are almost king. We need those skills. We need those environments to be created. We need the characters, etc. And this is like production in every sense of the word, right? Like, if you think about the sort of things that you might be doing for film production, you're definitely doing that for 360, like for all of those sorts of really involved affairs. If you have like sort of like a major project, you need the project managers. I think if you look at any sort of like traditional tech pipeline, like some variation of the talent there, you definitely need it. You definitely need it. And we need, like, for example, one area now that I know people are wondering, where are the people? It's even something like testers. Who is going to test these experiences when they're done? That is a really big gap right now. There used to be a company called Fishbowl VR that was doing testing. I don't think they're around anymore. So, hey, maybe somebody out there, that's the thing that you want to start doing, right, for the world.
Whoa, that's a lot. Yeah, thank you. It's definitely the whole works. There's so many different people needed. When you said 3D artist needed, I was like, wow, I should have paid my attention to fine art in school. but I guess that's late. So people asking, in the chat box, yes, the recording of this video is going to be made available in the next few weeks, so you can revisit it to listen to the parts, because I know people are pretty much, trying to catch every single word, Judith is saying. And also, like she said, you can come to their, or if you're in Lagos, Nigeria, you can come to their lab at Yaba to learn more from them. So, and also they have a website that you can visit and get in touch with them. Yeah, there's definitely there's no way if you want to learn and get specifics, you'll definitely get, if you actually go for it. So yes, the video is going to be available later on. All right, thank you, Judith, for that. That's very, very insightful. Next question I have is, so we're talking about VR equipment. Are they produced in the equipment to use, the cameras and all of that? Someone's asking if they've started producing them locally, and what opportunities are there, if people are thinking around that.
So no, none of it is produced locally. And if you're thinking about it, wherever you are right now, I'm giving you a virtual hug, because we need someone to say, hey, we're gonna have this available locally. And to give you a sense, like, this is something that I think most players in the space have been thinking about for a while. Like, how can we, break the shackles of having to rely on getting this from somewhere else? In 2017, we partnered with Hardware Lagos to do the Start of a Design Challenge, because we wanted to build a headset that was like suitable to our local environment. So the idea was then that we were going to build an all-in-one headset that was solar powered. We didn't get very far with it. So, if you're out there, if you're thinking about the space, please, please, please go for it. It'll be a hard road, but I hope you'll get support. I hope you make something of it. If we can help, let us know.
All right, awesome. Yeah, so I'd see the comments in the chat box, and you'll get the information you're looking for. So now we're about to, pivot to answering questions from the audience. And I'd just like to, point out that I know that people have sent in their questions, but occasionally we would ask for persons that want to unmute their mic to ask their questions. So that's definitely something that we're happy to do. So it's not just about like sending questions. Okay. I'm looking through the questions. Okay, funding. Well, I mean, so this. So before I pick, I'll just go to this. So someone asked about you being a female tech founder, right? What was that like? What experience? How did you, what was it like, and how are you able to navigate through that, right? So you're a female tech founder, then you're now in a new space that it's not fintech, right? So it's like the odds are you're stacked. Yeah. So how exactly? Yeah.
That's I suppose that's a great question and really relevant. It's definitely been a mixed bag. So the one thing will be like, oh, do you know that woman, who's doing like AR VR sort of like out of Africa, and and then it will be like, how many women are there? And then they'll be like, oh, it must be Judith, that sort of thing. So there's that. But I think the thing about things, like, especially sort of like when you're looking at being a woman in tech and all of that, is where do you have access to and where do you not? I think the other interesting thing about my particular case is that, as opposed to being in sort of like organized networks per se, I think a lot of my progress has been because of individuals, right? So it hasn't been about me kind of like going into sort of like particular rooms that are for girls or for boys, for the most part. It was that I met people who were kind of like supporting me sort of like regardless, right? Like, regardless of who I was. There was definitely that. I would say though that one thing that I found is that in the XR space, and by the way, if you're listening to this and you're a girl or woman, please, 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 we need you, is that there are a lot of amazing women, in the XR space around the world. And like, there are these really, really great communities starting out that they support, but that there's a lot of like love and support and community like around them. There's XR women, for example, and over time, they've really started to kind of like coalesce and like reach out. And I cannot stress how important they are, because I'll give you an example. last year we ran a boot camp for 2.5 months, and we couldn't get any funding for it, so we had to scrape together and do it ourselves. And you'll see that there was an outstanding faculty, like providing learning for those bootcamp participants over that period. Everybody came, donated their time, their expertise, everything. And really shout out to the women who came from the, and women from Harvard, from the World Bank, who just kind of like dropped everything and came and organized this with me. Like, it was crazy. I'm just like, are you guys serious? So there's that. So I think definitely find the ones that will support you. You will obviously come across all barriers. There'll be people who will not take you seriously. I've been places where I've been in like events and they're like, people come and talk to me and like, oh, we'd be interested in partnering with Imisi 3D. We'd like to speak to the boss. And I'm like, yeah, great. Okay, so you're speaking to me. How can I help you? And they're like, no, we want to speak to the boss. And I'm like, all right, we clearly have a problem. You know what I mean? So, I mean, that will happen. But, I think you just gotta, just make sure you're in situations where there's no like actual danger to you, but you will get the people that dismiss you. That is that. You will get like all sorts of things. For me personally, it's that, first of all, I have an amazing group of supporters and I can always go back to them, rely, cry, whatever I need to. And that, that persistence thing I talked about, that regardless, I'm just going ahead, right, to do what I need to do.
All right, awesome. Yeah, it's very, unfortunate to hear that still happens, but yeah, good to hear that, you're changing the narrative. So this question from Princess. Princess, you let me know if you want to ask this question live. Something about using PR for personal and business growth and branding. I'm curious about this. So Princess, if you would like to answer the question live, just unmute your mic and speak. While we're waiting for Princess, so Adejoke is asking what prospects or potentials are there for healthcare in VR. So I think she's trying to get to specifics. I know we said a lot about education. I know healthcare is also a space where VR is actually okay.
Hello.
All right.
Good
Princess. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Okay, I'm very curious to know how this can be applied in personal business and branding, because I've followed this particular class from the beginning and it's very enlightening. I'm also a small scale startup business owner. I'm into the beauty section of business. So I'm really curious to know how this can be applied in personal branding, especially, and then business growth. Thank you so much.
Princess, hi, thank you very much for your question and thank you for listening. I hopefully will get to your entire question, but I noticed that you said one of the things that you are interested in is beauty, the business of that. And I have to say that that is one area that is really being impacted by the XR technologies, extended reality technologies, and specifically augmented reality. So augmented reality, you may know, is the digital being superimposed on the physical world, as opposed to VR, where the idea is to immerse you in this digital or some other constructed world. And the way that augmented reality has been playing significantly in the beauty space, for example, is that there's a lot around people being able to try things out without actually using them. You know what I mean? So testing out shades of, makeup, for example, things like that, right? Or like even the recommendations that come, like your face might be scanned and then the recommendations in terms of like what it might be best for you to use. And we're seeing that sort of like possibility around different elements of sort of like retail right now. So you might have heard that there are big plays from organizations like Nike, right, going into the XR space, particularly looking at augmented reality. Are there ways in which, if you want to buy a new pair of sneakers, that you can actually have a 3D 3D sort of like model of that sneaker, like, right in front of you, like from your phone, and you're like able to, kind of like look at it all around and decide, is this the one for me, right? So there's all of that happening. Furniture companies, you probably know of Taylor here in Nigeria, a really amazing furniture company that very early on was leveraging augmented reality, so that if you wanted to purchase a piece of furniture, you could go on their website, find the sofa or the table, and actually see what it would look like in your living room, which is incredible. So there are all of these sort of like applications, and I haven't even scratched the surface when it comes to business. I think specifically for personal branding and personal business, I think it would depend on what exactly you were trying to achieve. Sort of like from the personal element, there's a now current move. If you're in the space, you probably know about those Ready Player Me avatars, where people are actually creating, I suppose, what will be the physical representation of their, digital twins in a sense, right? Like, the person that will be them in these virtual worlds. And I think that there are a lot of plays that can be done with that, and ways in which digital you can play in a lot of different spaces. And I think that that might be one way to leverage and extend your personal brand. But I would say that the question would depend on really what you want to do. And the thing that I always recommend for everyone is, if you haven't tried out the technologies before, please, please, please try it out. Because as many use cases as I might be able to tell you about, one thing I will tell you that always happens is that once I put a headset on somebody, right? Once I put it on, they take off. They'll be like, oh my goodness, what if we could do this? What if I did this? Blah, blah, blah. The ideas just start flowing. So believe me, your expertise, all you have to do is just marry that with an experience with the technologies, and then you get going.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Princess. Thank you, Judith. Interestingly, I would like to make sure that question.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I hope I answered your question.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did to a very great extent.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So I see that there are more questions about use cases. So I will just make the question of Ejike and Adejoke. They're asking about, use case in healthcare and also oil sector. So I think it's while you said they have to put it on, but it'd be nice to hear what possible use cases there are.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I like to call out all the people who've done great work in the space. So another company, and I think this is way back in 2018, you might have heard of Quadrant. So they're sort of like a studio that does animation and a whole bunch of other things. And I think it must have been back in 2018 that they built a virtual reality simulation. And this is for the energy sector, so oil and gas, that was training for health and safety. So this was like the fire hazard training on an oil rig. So there are those sorts of applications where if you think about what the cost might be to actually get someone into one of those environments and do the testing in real life and hope that they don't actually burn down anything, like all of that, as opposed to them being able to do it, in this lifelike simulation when they're going through all of the motions, you can see that like really, this is a fantastic use case. So that's one that I'll leave for the energy sector. And then just think about all of those sort of like high cost, high risk environments, and the fact that you can then have those activities carried out virtually. So at least the individual who's going to be carrying it out can start to develop the right muscle memory so that when they're in the space, that time to productivity is cut down dramatically, right? When it comes to healthcare, so many use cases. I mean, even sort of like before this recent uptick in terms of interest in the XR technologies, there was a lot of focus on the HoloLens being used for medical training. And you can imagine how valuable it is to have medical students sort of like be in situations where they're encountering, like there's obviously the physical body, and they're getting all of this information about what they're supposed to be doing and how best to do it and what's right and what's wrong. You know, that is amazing, and like making all sorts of knowledge available that wouldn't otherwise be available, right? Another example, one that we're actually working on, we're working on a voice-driven virtual reality game called Autism VR. And for this game, we've been implementing UNICEF's policy guidance on the use of AI with children. And the idea is that with this game, you come into a room, you have a conversation with a lady who's a guide, and she tells you a little bit about autism, and she gives you some information on how best you might interact with a child who's on the autistic spectrum. And then you go and visit your family friends. They're called the Okafos. They have a son called Tunde, and Tunde is on the spectrum. And he's this 10-year-old boy. And the idea is that you then practice what you learned in the previous room with the guide. And you have those conversations, and hopefully you're able to engage the child and get the child to respond to you. You know, so that is one way in which sort of like with XR, you can start to promote awareness about like neurodiversity. You can start to teach skills that will allow more people to engage with people who are neurodiverse. And we've been working with another incredible sort of like startup out of Nigeria called AskTokes.com that works with children who are neurodiverse. So many, like I said, many use cases. If we wanted to do that, we could be here all day, but I hope those to give you a bit of an idea.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, it's about the use cases. I guess people just want to connect it to what they do. I know that there's a question about, you know, a painting company, and, you know, I can easily, from what you've said, tell that, you know, just by creating like a VR experience of what it's like for the walls to be painted at particular, it's basically more immersive than just a picture. You know, there's pictures, there's video. So as the depth increases, you know, the more it stimulates the senses. So Lou Ogbe asks a question. This is a question that, you know, they ask people during job interviews, like, where do you see Imisi in 5 years, right? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? So yeah, where do you see Imisi 3D 5 years?
So I really hope that in 5 years, I really hope that it would be the case that we didn't have to be doing the work that we were doing. And what I mean by that is that, like, there's a thriving ecosystem, you know, and that all the things that we'd like to see happen have happened, that there are lots of access spaces all over the continent, hubs where people can access equipment, that there's lots of funding coming in, that like, all of those sorts of things. And I think if that was the case, then we would likely like really sort of like carry out you know, more fully evolved version, some of our initiatives, whether that might be VR for schools or like work with healthcare or production, that sort of thing, that could then be like a lot more robust, you know, and be sort of like a standalone thing. But that said, if I'm being really honest, in 5 years, I think we'll still be on this. We'll still be sort of like driving as much as we can to get the ecosystem going. I am optimistic though that, you know, thankfully the spotlight is on the space now. And for me, what that means is that more people will get involved. What that also means is that there'll be more partnerships, more collaborations. Hopefully there'll be more money. We talked about it being a bumper year for VC funding last year for the continent. Hopefully we see sort of like equivalent sort of like money when it comes to impact investing, particularly, and I have to stress, particularly for exponential technologies. I think it is a particular bugbear in mind that the world seems to think that some technologies should be on the African continent and some should not. That said, there is also this onus on us to fund this ourselves as well. So, you know, money in Africa has to also think about Africa in the future, or like accelerating Africa, like, you know, 100 years forward. What technologies should they be thinking about? Who is supporting the astrophysicists? Who's supporting nanotech? Like all of that, we have to be thinking about that.
All right. More money. I like the sound of that. Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely make things easier, and, you know, more projects Just talking about that, you have two persons who are asking something similar, which is this is for a tech entrepreneur, with an idea looking to build. How can they get funding to build their or bootstrap their way? And I know that Imisi is not for profit, but even that is a way of getting. There is some funding, to do that. So yeah, so just a sense of what you've seen, maybe from your experience. Especially your space. It's a bit of a different space.
Yeah. So one thing, we're not for profit per se, we're just impact driven. I think that's the preferable way to describe ourselves. In terms of how to get funding, if you are that is the question, right? Especially if you want to do something completely different. So the thing is, if you're doing something that's, fairly unique, you might sort of like scour the landscape and then find, because it's so niche, that there is one little corner somewhere in the world where they're just looking for people who will do it. So the first thing is do your research, right? Like find out if somewhere in the world, wherever it is, and always remember that, when they say the world is your oyster, even more so when you're starting things, right? Even more so when you're going into spaces that might not be the norm. Like definitely, spend your time trying to find out what else might be happening elsewhere in the space and look at that. The other thing I have to say, to be real, is, it's a hard world out there. Be comfortable first, try and look after yourself. If you can make money, be somewhere where you're making like good money, and then you can start putting a little bit to the side and start experimenting with the thing you want to do. That is always a good way to start. There are no points being won in the suffering game, so as much as possible, please look after you. And then the other thing I will say is, as quickly as you can, try and prove yourself. And what I mean by that is try and do something that shows what is possible or what will be good. And the reason I say this is because if anything, a lot of what we've done is because people will come to us and say, we've had somebody come to us and say, oh, we spoke to somebody in Google, we wanted to do this, and they said we should come to you. We spoke to someone in Microsoft and they said we should talk, things like that. So try and do the work so that people know who you are and what you do. And it goes without saying, man, African excellence, kill it when you're doing it, right? Do the very, very best.
Yeah, thank you. I love that final part. Have some good work, would pretty much advertise you, recommendations, all of that. Another part of the question is talking about getting the right people to work with. What does that look like? I know you say you need more talent,
blood, sweat, and tears.
And you went this by yourself. So what was it like, getting the right talent, and what are some things that have helped you, in doing this?
So, this talent question is a super. I think every startup, everyone is just shaking their head right now going talent. The thing though is, let's be honest, there are a lot of incredible people out there, right? So someone like me personally, so first of all, my background is in sort of business psychology, people and all of that. But I'm also one of the big believers, sorry parents and all, but I'm not really keen on degrees and stuff like that, but I'm very, very keen on people and individuals, right? So, and for a very long time, I was in mostly in a very different talent space. So I really wasn't looking for anybody to do anything in particular, except be really, really passionate about the XR technologies and want to grow in that space. You know what I mean? So it was fairly niche, but it was also not restricted in terms of specific qualifications that you had to have or specific attributes. That said, if you ask anyone that works with me, I already made the point about excellence and all of that. I do expect people to apply themselves and do really, really great work. It goes without saying, I expect people to write properly, things like that. So when it comes to finding talent, it's been just people walking in the door, right? People saying, I want to do XR. 10 times out of 10, if you walk in and you're curious and you want to work, I will have a conversation with you. A lot of times we can't afford to take people on. So, you know, we'll say, well, we might not be able to have you on, but we always accept volunteers. And that's why we have like this big community of people who've passed through our doors or who've supported us on a particular project or, you know, done something or the other. There's that. But I suppose for me, the core is the integrity around your purpose. If you are interested in these technologies, if you will work hard, you know, and generally we like you to be someone who will enjoy kind of like the space we have and add good vibes, you know, but yeah, it's flexible. But when it comes to looking for core talent, oosh, the competition is stiff, isn't it? You know, and everybody's on a plane out of here if they can make it. And you know, I actually don't knock that at all, because I'm also saying that's where the airport is if you need to go. But it does mean that we have to start thinking critically about talent, you know, here at home.
Yeah, thank you, Judith. You've just placed an open call, and I see many people saying they would love to volunteer. I bet there are going to be a lot of people walking down your door.
It's like, oh, no more space. No, thank you all. I appreciate you all. Thank you. Please email us at hello@imisi3d.com, and we'll get back in touch. Thank you.
Yeah, so look, once you find Judith, just hold on. Just and I'm sure she will let you in. But yeah, thank you to everyone. Yeah, it definitely shows that there is some, you know, interest and, you know, a lot of passion. My colleague Michael would most likely put that, you know, the information, the email address, so you can send your email to your interest, you know, the indication of interest to that email address instead of dropping your email address in the chat box. Yeah, so once my colleague Michael puts that, you're able to send your email to that. The next question is from Dora. I believe Dora is from Dubai. Curious, I would like to know if you'd like to answer this live. You know, how do you push past, I guess, bureaucracy and red tape in Nigeria? And I can tie this with, there's another question that has to do with policy. What policies need to be in place really for this space to thrive more? Because no matter what we do in private sector, really, if you don't have policies backing you. So Dora, would you like to ask this? I've given you the permission to. I see people still sending in their email addresses. There's really no need to do that. Just my colleague Michael will soon put the email address you should send it to. So I believe it's hello@imisi3d.com, right?
Yes, that's right.
That's even pretty straightforward. You don't even need hello@imisi3d.com. I don't think Dora will be taking this up. So yeah, Judith, yeah, the issue of bureaucracy policy, what do you see?
Yeah, I mean, bureaucracy is real, almost everywhere. Our situation being perhaps more interesting than most places, you know, but it is what it is. I think for me, I'm definitely of the school of thought that, you know, do your work. That's for me, like just get on with what you need to do. And I think one of the reasons for that is because for me, I've definitely been in the sense that we're behind, right? Like, you know, that we're playing catch up and all of that. And that means for me that I'm thinking about how we can move the fastest to get where, you know, I feel we should be when it comes to these technologies. And if I want to focus on that, then I have to focus on that. That said, to whoever asked the policy question, sort of like virtual high five to you. The policy question is one that has been top of mind for me for the last few years. And the reason is because I think that if we're going to make a meaningful shift when it comes to these technologies, not just here in Nigeria, but across the whole continent, that there must be an African strategy, right? There must be an African strategy for the extended reality technologies, and we have to be intentional about it. And policy, like that thinking around policy, must affect things like how we're thinking about talents, how we're thinking about industry, you know, like the regulatory stuff that you would naturally think about, all of that. How do we make sure that we are getting XR international curriculums, right? How are we making it a staple? At the end of last year, Meta announced that they were working with the Secondary School Board of Education in India. The goal is that they're going to train 10 million, I'll say that number again, 10 million students in AR and VR. Like that kind of approach is the reason why India is ahead of the game when it comes to technology in the world. And if we don't think like that here, I mean, you can just imagine, where we're going to end up. So there's that. There's industry. Now, some organizations are starting to think about XR. How can we make sure that it's viable? Even more importantly, how do we support the people that say we want to get into the space? How are we going to incentivize XR? How are we going to make sure that equipment comes into the country and you can buy it at the same price as you would elsewhere in the world? All of these, and social policy, I mean, it is so critical right now. And I hope it is a space that more and more people will start to think and talk about. And of course, I suppose one of the positives of the metaverse is that now all of a sudden, because everybody's now thinking about the metaverse and thinking about how we should think about it and regulate it, that policy is sort of happening in parallel, right? So let's hope that on the continent here, we start to think about what it means for us. We start to have those conversations and put those structures in place, make sure we have the right foundation so more people can get involved, so our people can get educated, so we have those partnerships between industry, academia, and this youthful workforce that's just beginning.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Judith. Very enlightening to hear about the potential partnership with, India for that 10 million. That's a lot of people, actually. That's a lot. I see a lot of people still dropping in or sending in their email addresses. My colleague Michael has put in the chat box, the email address to send your indication to volunteer. That's hello@imisi3d.com. All right. So please don't drop your email address. Send an email to hello@imisi3d.com. For people joining in, yes, this session is recorded and it's going to be uploaded later on. So yeah, you can refer back to it and watch it again. At this point, before we take the next question, Michael, I'd like you to be on standby. Michael has a question around computing and hardware. He says he's a founder of a hardware startup. If you're able to take it live, Michael, just you can unmute your mic. You can just stay. But would like to, the team would like to share a poll. So just to get a sense of how this event is and what you're learning. So there'll be a poll showing up on your screen. So it's currently showing up right now. So just answer it. About just three questions for, are you currently trying to enter into new markets? Which of these challenges have you faced along the line? Have you learned insights that will be useful to your startup's growth? Yes, I see people answering the questions. Yeah, so more people have tried to enter new markets. So we have the poll going up. David, Gabriel, Michael. Maybe David has a question. So, okay, so people are currently answering the poll. Okay, so so I guess Michael is here now. So yeah, last question, Michael. Michael, what's your question? You can unmute your mic and ask.
Hello.
Hi, Michael, we can hear you.
Yeah, great. Yeah, good afternoon. What I simply wanted to ask was, I wanted to know just how important it is that computing, in terms of the hardware needed to make the contents that you guys make. Just how important is it that is it important that there's a new player on the block that can provide solutions much more tailored towards the African markets, but still able to compete in the world at large? Or are the current solution providers we have now good enough? Because over the years of supporting customers, the little that do come and make purchases. It's kind of I'm kind of having, sorry that this question is a bit more about me because I'm trying to understand the market, but I feel you would give me a lot of insight into it. And I just wanted to know, like, is coming into this market a dead pursuit, or is there something here, especially since we whole talk of metaverse, and I do know that VR is a very computing intensive application. So I just wanted to know if there is a space, if there is a chance here for me.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you for your question, Michael. And I suppose it's a really important question in terms of what do I do if I want to play in this space from a hardware perspective. Yeah. I mean, the hardware space is niche. So in terms of hardware, one obvious thing with VR would be the headsets, right? Would you be someone that would make headsets available locally? I think if you go online now, you can find a number of places that you can get headsets, probably ordering online, Jumia, Conga, that sort of thing. I mean, like today, what the market might be, I would say is still sort of like starting or growing. I think in a year or two, it'll be very different. And I think what's going to impact that, it's probably just keeping an eye on things to see how quickly that uptake starts to happen in terms of, you know, the organizations trying to dip their feet into the water. Like, when will people finally just say, oh, okay, we're doing it, we're going to launch something, you know, because from there it just starts to grow. And then the next company that wants to do it, you know, especially a company that's looking for a really quick turnaround and doesn't have the time to wait for those products to be shipped in, might then just look around and say, hey, where can I get it locally? I know that that has started to happen. There were a few cases I was privy to last year where, you know, folks were like, I need a headset, where can I go and get one locally? And I think the thing is, alongside the headsets, specifically, and there are different types, you know, it might also be looking at what other sorts of accessories might people need if they want to do VR or AR or MR, and they're here and they wouldn't typically get their hands on locally. So there's that. But you know, it's still going to be, I think, fairly tricky for a while. Like, I mean, don't divert your entire self to it, but definitely dip your toe into the water and test the market is what I would say.
Okay, thank you very much. Right now, I'm focused more on just providing computing, but thank you. Like, I'm talking about computers now.
Oh, I see you. You're talking about the computers. In that case, I would say that, so if you're talking about the PCs or the laptops, I would say that the kind of laptops that you use for VR are actually the kind that even now sort of like video editors, people in that space are using, right? So I don't think you'd be going completely out of your way if you're looking at, say, the latest Acer Predator, you know, that sort of like, you know, laptop, then it's probably one that can also be used for virtual reality. So, you know, if you're in the space, you probably, you know, like, it's just really looking at the processing power, the graphics card that you check. And if you have like the advanced versions of those, then it works well for VR. So it's just knowing so that you can advise your potential clients and customers, but it's likely you're probably already dabbling with the hardware.
Yes, I am. Yeah. All right. Thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you very much.
So did I answer your question then? Because I'm not sure then that
your answer, like I said earlier, is just everything you say is an enlightenment. I'm coming into what I know is the hardware and what customers need to be able to produce the works that they do. But with the part I don't really understand is trying to get a good market fit, and most especially the whole business of it. I don't have a background in business. I have a background in tech, just technical things. So hearing you speak and you answering my questions, there are some things I did not ask that you answered. So it's all good. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
thank you so much, Judith. That was a light thing. I think something I picked from that was the same laptops used for VR, video editors. I guess, you know, creative and use them. So And when you look at the space, it's not just hardware-wise, it's not just, in this context, it's not just only computing, it's not just only VR. Like, it can also be used for other nascent, spaces, which means, a wider space. So thank you very much, everyone. That's all we can take for now. If you have more questions, you have a number of options. Send your questions. I believe you can send your questions to us. The email hello@imisi3d has been dropped. For you to send it in. You can look for Judith and ask her a question. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to the attendees, everyone. Right now, my colleague Michael will be dropping the post-event survey link. We like to know how how well this event went. Any feedback. We welcome feedback. So please take out a few minutes to just fill the survey form. If you enjoyed this session, if you thought it was very insightful, the next session of this Learning from Ground Up event will be on the 11th of February with Femi Adeyemo, founder and CEO of Energy. So the link will be posted in chat group also, so you can register. So if you're looking forward to learn more, Femi Adeyemo on the 11th of February. So just sign up on the link and you'll get updates. Like I've said before, this session is being recorded. So in a few weeks' time, we'll upload it on Tech Cabal's YouTube channel. So you can actually go back to watch it. Once again, this event, this Building from Ground Up series is powered by the UK Nigerian Tech Hub with Tech Cabal as an implementing partner. So you should actually check up, follow the UK Nigerian Tech Hub, follow them on social media. They're actually doing a lot of great work by organizing this to ensure that founders have access to stories and resources that will help them build more sustainable businesses. This event, was also put together. Yes, Tech Cabal, but TC Insights. Tech Cabal Insights is Tech Cabal's data research and intelligence unit, which provides actionable data for startups and the tech ecosystem, across Africa. Investors, entrepreneurs, regulators. That's Tech Cabal Insights for you. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Finally, of course, with this session won't be complete without telling you to subscribe for the TC Daily newsletter. It's pretty much one of the most comprehensive roundup of tech news stories in Africa. So you get to know what's happening and you get to know more things. You get to know a number of things, like when we're having events and, when something interesting happens in the XR, VR, AR space, you get to know about things like that. So thank you, everyone, for joining. Links to sign up have been shared. So just look at the chat box and sign up for the next event, sign up for TC Daily. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. Follow the UK Nigerian Tech Hub on social media, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Looking forward to seeing you at the next event. Bye for now.